Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Tanya in Real Life. As we jump into chapter 17, the first thing that's going to hit us, and when we get into the text, is that now the Baal Tanya is answering a question that we saw right at the beginning on the cover page of the book. So before we answer the question, before we jump into the text, I thought it would be a nice time to kind of zoom back and get the bigger picture of the flow of the information that we've been doing from day one. And on the notes, you'll see I put out the outline of what we're talking about today. So on the cover page, that's a very short cover page of the entire Sefer Tanya, the Baal Tanya says this Sefer is going to answer one question. And he tells us what the question is. The question is regarding the pasuk, Kikari v'lecha hadavar ma'id b'ficha uvilvavacha la'aseh. For it, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling, it's in Chumash Devarim, when Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to the Jewish people before he passes away, and he's saying, Kikari v'lecha, it, meaning the entire Torah, to keep the entire Torah, is very close to you. Kikari v'lecha, it's very, very close to you. B'ficha uvilvavacha la'aseh, in your mouth, meaning in your speech, uvilvavcha, in your emotions, which also includes our thoughts, la'aseh, to do it in action. So thought, speech, and action, each and every one of us, it's very easy. Kari v'lecha hadavar ma'id. Kari ma'id, it's very, very accessible, very possible, very close to each and every one of us to fulfill the entire Torah. And the question obviously is, okay, you could say you could do something, you could say you could even speak something, but uvilvavcha, in your emotions, how is it possible to love Hashem? Either I love Hashem or I don't. If I love Hashem, then I don't need to be encouraged to love Hashem. And if I don't love Hashem, it is what it is. How am I supposed to change it? How is it very possible? And how is it possible to align all our behavior with the Torah? It seems to be a very, very difficult, monumental, it's a huge goal. Why is the Torah telling us in what way? What is that fail-proof path? What are the strategies that each of us can do that make it so possible? That was the question, which wasn't presented as a question. On the cover page, the Baal Tanya says this Sefer is going to explain how it's possible for each and every one of us to do this. And then Perek Aleph, the Tanya begins with a question. How should we see ourselves? When we look at ourselves in the mirror, are we good? Are we bad? Are we ugly? Are we beautiful? What are we? How should we interpret the things, the facts that we see about ourselves? And the immediate guidance that we get right in the beginning of Perek Aleph is, don't go down that shame train. Don't think of yourself. Don't see yourself as a bad person, because that's going to make you sad and disempowered from fulfilling your life's purpose. That's that goes down to shame, sadness, and disempowerment. So we're not going to go there. Then the Baal Tanya lists 5 primary labels, and I'm calling them labels, but they're descriptive terms that are used throughout Chazal, throughout Torah sources, to describe to describe us, to describe our relationship with, to describe us. There's a tzaddik v'tovlei, a tzaddik who has it good. Tzaddik v'ralei, a tzaddik who has it bad. A rasha v'tovlei, a rasha who has it good, and a rasha v'ralei, a rasha who has it bad, and a beinoni, the average person. Now, the Baal Tanya then, shows us different meanings. I just said tzaddik v'tovlei means a tzaddik who has it good. The Baal Tanya gives us different meanings for those descriptive terms. And ultimately, the Baal Tanya says that there's a difference between, he says that most times when these words are used, they're used only to describe our behavior. They're not descriptions of who we really are on a deeper level. They're describing our behavior. They're not describing us. They're what we do. They're not who we are. So then the question is, so what is who we are? Who are we? What is our deeper self? And for that, the Baal Tanya starts answering that question at the end of chapter 1, where he says we have 2 completely different souls. We're a dual personality, that we have 2 completely different operating systems, 2 completely separate life forces. And not just 2 different parts, they're souls, they're life forces, they're drives. And our first one is a human self, our animal self, which includes all of our natural human desires, tendencies, attitudes, perspectives, emotions, cravings, habits, all that comes to us naturally, all that we acquire when we're not actively thinking and aligning ourselves with Hashem's reality. And then in chapter 2, we learn about our neshama, which is an actual part of Hashem. And being an actual part of Hashem, our neshama is so incredibly magnificent and beautiful and rich that it cannot even be described in words. There's only we can describe aspects of our neshama, but we can't describe the actual neshama. So the unspoken message is that our neshama, being our deepest self, our richest self, the part of us that has the most value, that is who we are. But the next few chapters, the Baal Tanya tells us about the workings. What's our relationship with our neshama? How do we activate our neshama? What's the relationship between our neshama and our bodies? How does it get expressed? How do we access that wealth, that unstoppable beauty and empowerment that we have? And the same thing, what's our relationship with our human dimension? How does that work? In what way is it the same? In what way is it different? And we went through a lot of that in the early chapters of the Tanya. Then, once we're doing that, one important thing that we want to mention with all of that is that those two drives, the Baal Tanya compares our two souls to two kings that are battling, that are in a constant state of battle for control. They each want to control the territory that they think belongs to them, that they want to belong to them. So in the analogy, our bodies are the territory that each of our two forces, our two kings, are trying to control. And how do they control our bodies? By controlling and directing and being expressed in our conscious thoughts, in our speech, and in our action, and the things we think about, in the words we say, and the actions that we take. That's the territory that our two souls are fighting about. Now, understanding that whole complex inner reality that each of us has, our world, our inner worlds, now the Baal Tanya then goes back and explains. Now we can understand, what does Atsadik v'Tovlei mean? What does those four descriptive terms, the five descriptive terms, now we can understand what they are. And using the language that the Baal Tanya introduced to us about our inner worlds. And the big idea about that is that each of us has a human self, which has all kinds of cravings and desires that are not aligned with Hashem. They reflect an attitude of, I am here in this world by myself, with myself, for myself. They reflect an attitude of needing comfort and pleasure and needing to perpetuate ourselves as our primary goal in life, to protect ourselves from any discomfort. And Atsadik v'Tovlei is somebody who took all that energy and transformed it to be part of the neshama, to be part of that force that only wants to live by Hashem, that has that awareness of the truth and wants to live by the truth of by Hashem, with Hashem, and for Hashem. A Rasha is somebody who has it the opposite. Okay, a Rasha is somebody whose animal self is winning the race, whose animal self is controlling. The animal self, the human dimension, is dominating a person's consciousness, where the neshama is stuffed into a corner, it's gagged, it's unseen, it's unheard, it's ignored. That's the Rasha, the Ralai, right? The Rasha who doesn't even feel that consciousness of the neshama saying, hey, what about me, right? A Rasha v'Tovlei, still, he ignores Hashem and ignores the neshama, but still has that consciousness of hears the neshama's voice and thinks about it and feels for it and empathizes with it and desires it, but just doesn't come out in action. And then we can understand who a Beinoni is. A Beinoni is someone who is in a constant state of battle. That means the two kings are constantly fighting. The animal self is super strong. This person, which is all of us, we constantly slip into that mode of by myself, with myself, for Hashem. We forget who we are. We forget what our life is about. We forget our empowerment, our beauty, our awesomeness, and we feel lonely. We feel independent. We feel and we forget. So, and we act accordingly. And we, in our minds, in our hearts, in our conscious thoughts, And then in our behavior. A Beinoni is somebody who slips into that mode of the animal self or the human dimension and constantly keeps coming back to the neshama's way of being. The animal self is super strong, puts up a very good fight, but the neshama still manages to dominate the behavior. That was our introduction to what the Beinoni is. And the Baal Tanya says that each and every one of us has it in us to be that Beinoni. We could win every battle every time. And then the next few chapters, which we just finished, from chapter 12 till including chapter 17, those are the practical ideas, the strategies, the game plan or the battle plan for how we could actually strengthen our neshama and win those inner battles and let our neshama have that upper hand in how it expresses itself in our behaviors. And just to put this in context of our original question, our original question was, how should we see ourselves, right? And the Baal Tanya never answered that outright. But when you know you have a neshama that is so precious, in our regular lives, in our day-to-day lives, we always define something by whatever it is that has the most value. So if you have a beautiful picture frame, an expensive picture frame, and it's framing cheap art, then we say that it's a frame that has art inside of it. But if the artwork is very expensive and drawn by a very professional, renowned artist, then the art is what's important and the frame is just what's framing it. So too, when we understand what our neshama is, then clearly when we look at ourselves, who are we? We're neshamas, we're carriers of Hashem's light. We are designed, defined, and powered by the King of all kings, the master of the universe, the creator, the infinite one, right? And that's the essence of who we are. But then we want to know, well, what is my behavior? What label can I attribute to my behavior? Because whoever we think we are, that's how we show up. And the Baal Tanya says, be a Beinoni. Be a Beinoni. And many people who are new to Tanya, they say, what? A Beinoni? I just want to be average? No, I want to be amazing. I want to be that Atsadik. But then we come to discover that the Beinoni is incredible. The Beinoni is someone who's absolutely aligned with Hashem and wins every battle every time. And so, and how does the Beinoni do that? Through the strategies that we learned in the past few chapters. Now, last week in chapter 16, we learned that we have two kinds of emotions. Every one of us has two kinds of emotions. Okay, we have, number one, we have full-blown, full-fledged, wholehearted emotions that we experience in our hearts and in our bodies. It's an energy that flows through our systems and it expresses itself in our physical sensation. That's number one. And then we have undeveloped emotions, emotions that we experience mostly in our minds. They're intellectually oriented. It's kind of like our heart understands, but our heart is not pumping extra blood around those emotions. There's no energy on a physical level, but we have that desire on an intellectual level. And some of us, we all have both emotions, but some of us never get to that point where we have full-blown emotions around Hashem's truth. When we think about Hashem, we never feel excited. We feel like, okay, I want to feel excited about it. Intellectually, I should be happy to think that Hashem is with me, but I'm actually not happy, right? But I should be happy. And therefore, I'm going to do the motions that align with that desire or with where I want to be. Even if I don't have that energetic, full-blown emotion, I have that desire to be in that place of that emotion. And therefore, I'm going to act accordingly. And the Baal Tanya said that too counts as perfectly, absolutely valued emotions. Not only is it valid, not only is it meaningful and worthwhile, but the Baal Tanya says that when we do that, Hashem attaches our emotion, that intellectually oriented emotion, to every mitzvah that we do, and that becomes the wings that allow our mitzvah to soar higher than we could possibly reach with our full-fledged emotion. So there's a lot of validity and strength to the emotions that we experience that are not even full-blown emotions. They're just intellectually oriented. They're hidden in the recesses of our hearts, but we're kind of in touch with them. We're trying to be in touch with them, but it's not yet a full-blown energy. It counts perfectly well as emotions. And because of that, if that's considered a perfectly healthy, wholesome emotion, if a desire to desire is counted as an emotion, now in chapter 17, now the Baal Tanya says, with that, we can understand how Moshe Rabbeinu could look at us straight in our face and say, it's perfectly possible for you to have even emotions that are aligned with Hashem. If emotions would be full blown, if emotions would only mean like these palpating emotions in our heart, if emotions would only mean that, then that's, we know that that's beyond our reach. That's beyond the scope of our possibility. That's not possible. But if emotions means something that we could generate by focusing our attention and our thoughts on Hashem's greatness, then those kinds of emotions, and those kind of emotions count as emotions, then yes, it is possible. So with that, we're going to jump into the text of chapter 17. I hope that, that was just an overview of how we're coming to the chapter, the content of today's chapter. Okay, a Beinoni is someone whose mind and heart and actions are always aligned with Hashem's reality. The Torah tells us that a Beinoni is possible. It's possible for each and every one of us. And in what way is that possible? We've been learning about that throughout the last couple of chapters, but now we're coming to that place where we're just, because in the beginning, the Baal Tanya said, don't worry about how you feel, just do the right thing. Okay, then we talked about how do we get our emotions on board. And now we're saying that even if we didn't get our emotions fully on board, I still love, when I see that piece of chocolate, I have that desire that is more palpable in my heart than a desire for a mitzvah, let's say, right? So does my desire for a mitzvah count as an emotion? And the answer is yes, it does. Yes, it does, because I do desire it. I do desire that mitzvah. I'm just not feeling it intensely in my heart. My emotion is as yet undeveloped, but it's still there, and it still counts a lot and means a lot. So now the Baal Tanya is focusing especially on that because of that, our emotions, because we could consider those emotions as emotions, even though they're intellectually oriented and they're not energy flowing through our bodies, that's why now we can answer that original question. So let's jump into the text, chapter 17. It's on the bottom of the first page of the notes, that the text, the part of the text that we're going to do. We're not doing the whole text inside, but we're going to do the whole beginning of the chapter. Okay, so uvazeh yuvan masha kasav ki karev elacha hadavar ma'id beficha uvelvavacha la'asaysay. Now we can understand. With this, what we learn now in chapter 16 about the emotions and how even an intellectually oriented emotion is still counted as an emotion. Now we can understand what it says, that it's very possible, very accessible, very close to each and every one of us to, in our minds, in our hearts, to do it. Because seemingly, and this is our question that we started off with, since our hearts are beyond our control, it's neged achushal, and it's not in our senses. It's not a switch that we could turn on and off. And in parentheses, the Baal Tanya writes, "V'haTorah hi nitzchis," and the Torah is eternal, meaning we can't argue that and say that these words, it's very close to you, was Moshe Rabbeinu talking to his generation, because Moshe Rabbeinu was not just talking to his generation. He's talking to each and every one of us, because the Torah is eternal. So, she'ein karev ma'od hadavar lahapech libay mitayvas olam hazeh la'avas Hashem be'emes. You can't say that it's very close to transform the desires and the cravings of our hearts from desiring and feeling excited about physical pleasures and delights. We can't say that we can change that and now all of a sudden feel that same measure of delight and passion and excitement for our love of Hashem. It's really not so simple. It's not hard. It's It's not like it's very easy at all. So, and in the Gemara, now the Baal Tanya refers to a place in the Gemara that questions this, where Moshe Rabbeinu in a different time, in a different pasuk says, and now what is that? She says, Va'ata ma Hashem alekecha shoyel me'imcha ki im liyira Eser. He turns to Bnei Yisrael and says, now what is Hashem asking of you? Just to fear him. That's all he wants. And so the Gemara says, what? Really? You know, it's like someone says, what am I asking of you already? Just give me $1 million, you know? What do you mean? $1 million is nothing? $1 million is huge. And the Gemara asks that question about Moshe Rabbeinu's comment to Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, about the fear of Hashem. He says, what is Hashem asking of you already? Just fear him. And the Gemara says, what are you talking about? What, is fear such a small thing that you can minimize it like that? So if they said that about fear of Hashem, how much more so can it be said about love for Hashem? Because fear is a more intellectually oriented emotion. The more we understand something, the more we have awe about it. But love is something that you have to really generate. It's easier to pull back than to jump forward. And that's really what love is. So love is so much more difficult to attain. And yet we are saying that it's possible and it's easily accessible. So how could it be? And to elaborate on this question, the Baal Tanya says, "V'gam amru rabbeinu zechreinam lavracha the tzadikim dafka libam bershosam." Chazal tell us that tzadikim have control over their hearts, and they're saying tzadikim, righteous people, exclusively, meaning they have control over their hearts, and the rest of us do not. We do not have control over our hearts. So if I don't have control over my heart, how could I get my heart on board if I don't have control over my heart? So now the Baal Tanya explains something, which now he tells us this. He says, when the pasuk is telling us that we also have to get our hearts on board, the order of the words is important, because usually we say thought, speech, and action, where thought is the innermost, like thought is connected to us very deeply, and speech is a little bit more external, right? And action is even more external. So that's usually the order of how we describe our behavior. Thought from the most internal part of ourselves, to speech, to action. The other way would be from action to speech to thought. That would be from external to the most internal, right? But the pasuk mixes up the order entirely, and it seems to be that the order is not in either one of these two orders. It says, "B'ficha," in your mouth, meaning speech, "U'levavcha," in your emotion, which includes thought, and then last say action, which is not in any one of these orders. So the Baal Tanya says the reason why it's written specifically this way is because when the Torah is telling us that we need to get our emotions on board, we need to also love Hashem and have that real sense of awe for Hashem. It's not telling us that you have to now have, the standard is not the ideal version to be this person, to be the Beinoni, to be the person who's absolutely aligned with Hashem. You do not have to have energetic, full-fledged, pulsating emotions flowing through your body. That's not what you need. You only need enough emotion to generate behavior, to direct and influence your behavior. We only need enough emotion to say, you know what? I want this. Not that I want it and my soul is on fire and my heart is racing and I'm so excited and I want this. No, I want it enough to actually do it. I want it enough to do something about it, to take action. And with that, the Baal Tanya explains that that's what it means when it says that the Torah is so close to each and every one of us, that fulfilling the entire Torah is so close to each and every one of us. Because what it looks like when we're absolutely aligned with Hashem, it doesn't mean that we're passionately have this fire burning in our heart and we have all these physical reactions when we think about Hashem. No, It just means that we do the next right thing. We take that action that is aligned with Hashem. And that's hinted in the order of the way that the pasuk is written. In our mouths, with our speech, and our emotions, enough emotions to generate, to direct and influence and impact our actions, our behavior. So that's the next line. Let's go back into the text. I'm on the last line of the first of page 2. We said that already. Ella when the pasuk says to do it, right after the word bilvavcha, in your heart, it means that we don't need to change the nature of our emotions and develop full-blown emotions. We only need to strive for the kind of love that leads us to do Hashem's will, that leads us to align our behavior with Hashem's Torah and mitzvahs. Shehi reusa deliba shebetalu slave. This is the hiddenness of our heart, and it's present within our heart even when it's not in an active, revealed state, like a flaming love in our hearts. Very strong words coming up. And this love is exceedingly possible and easy for every person who has a brain. Why? Because our brains, our minds are within our control. We could control what we think about, and we could meditate about whatever we want as much as we want to. And when we will meditate about Hashem's awesomeness, about Hashem's greatness, automatically we will give birth, at least in our minds, at least in our minds, at least in our minds, we will have a desire to desire Hashem's, the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, because if we understand Hashem's greatness and we really internalize it and we let it sink in and we absorb the magnitude of the opportunity that we have in doing a mitzvah, because that's how we bond with Hashem, that's how we hug Hashem, that's how He embraces us, that's how we're one with, that's how we express our unity, our bond with Hashem. Of course we're going to want to. We might not have a full-blown emotion, but in our minds we're going to want to. In our minds we're going to understand, and in our minds we're going to lean towards that action. Okay. Now the Baal Tanya goes into a different discussion, which I'm not going to go into at length. We're not going to do it inside, but I just want to mention it because it is very important. Sorry. What if somebody feels that actually I have no control over my behavior? All of this is saying we have control over our behavior, and we even have control over our hearts. We don't have control, full-blown control over our hearts, but we could, through controlling our minds, through meditating about Hashem's greatness, we could influence our hearts, at least enough to motivate us to action. So now a person might say, well, what doesn't work for me? It doesn't work for me. I have no control. I can't stop myself. I cannot stop myself from getting unaligned with Hashem's will. I can't. It's not working for me. To that, the Baal Tanya says that when somebody is a rasha be'emes, he uses the word be'emes, meaning that this is a person who constantly negates and ignores his neshama. This is a person who constantly acts on Hashem's hiddenness, who constantly has gone into, acted on that mindset of by myself, with myself, for myself, to the point that he stopped hearing the voice of his neshama. He stopped hearing it. He's been ignoring it for so long. He's thrown so much separation. He's so entrenched, enmeshed in that animalistic drive of like, I'm here in this world by myself, with myself, for myself, that the system, his internal system is broken. We say that schar mitzvah, the reward for doing a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and the punishment for doing an avera, the effect, the cause, the impact of doing an avera is an avera itself. What does that mean? That the impact of doing an avera is such that it disturbs our consciousness. It breaks our system. The system really is that our neshama has a say, our neshama has a voice, and we can sometimes act on it and we sometimes don't act on it. But for a person who has repeatedly ignored that voice, what happens is we stop hearing it. And for that, then a person will feel the practical implication of that is that they feel that they have no choice, because our neshama is our power of choice. So if we buried our neshama in the very deep recesses of our consciousness, what we need to do is teshuvah. And the Baal Tanya briefly describes how to do teshuvah here. Later on in the Tanya, it comes up at greater length, but he says that basically there's a certain sense of brokenness. When a person feels broken, people, we describe this as, I've once felt this kind of broken, where like, I really knew I was wrong. And that brokenness is so powerful, because remember we talked about this when we were talking about the word bittul, which is transparent to Hashem, right? By Hashem, with Hashem, for Hashem. We were talking about how it's not our unhealthiness that makes us unhealthy. It's not our toxic behaviors and thought patterns that makes us unhealthy. What makes us unhealthy is our attachment to all of that stuff. What makes us really unhealthy is our marriage to it. It's our refusal to let go, our refusal to see it as something, our inability to see it as something separate from us, from ourselves. But the minute we can see this voice in my head is just, somebody shared last night on the book discovery group, she said that whenever she gets a compliment, she right away negates it. Even if she knows that it's true, there's a voice in her mind that's just resisting it and saying, it can't be, it's not possible, it's not even true, even though intellectually she knows that it's true. And really, the fact that she has that awareness, the fact that she knows, hey, that's a voice in my head that's telling me it's not true, but really I know that it is true, that already means she's not attached to that voice, because she's questioning it, she's challenging it, she's saying, what am I going to do about it? It's annoying, right? So it's not that now that voice is invalidated. She knows it's invalidated. She knows it's nothing. There's already a separation between her and that resistance to goodness in her heart. She already has that space where she knows it's not really me. It's not what I even want to believe. It's not even true. But somehow I don't know how to let go of it. Once a person says that, they're already on the path to letting go of it, because it's not our unhealthiness that makes us unhealthy. It's our attachment to it. It's our stuckness. So teshuvah, the process of teshuvah, the key to teshuvah is a certain sense of brokenness. We're like, oh, what I thought was real was wrong. What I thought was right was misguided. And that brokenness, it breaks the barrier between us and our neshama, and it allows the light of the neshama to flow through to our consciousness once again. That's a very short version of what the Baal Tanya describes at length. Let's open to questions right now, and then we will conclude. Then we'll go back to the text. Exactly, that was so well explained, that the more we are attached to our stories, and the more limited we are by our personal experiences, and we think this is all that it is, my story is the fact, then we become we become prisoners of our stories and victims of our stories, and then we can't get out of it. Somebody wrote here a question: how can I know if I am passive or my emotions are suppressed? Even if I am comparing to other things in my life, if I have emotions there, maybe that is also suppressed. You know what? Just like everything else in our lives, our emotions develop. as we become, as we grow, our emotions, our capacity to feel could grow. So I wouldn't worry, how can I know if I am passive or my emotions are suppressed? Just keep doing the work to become aware of what's going on in your inner world. Keep becoming aware of your thoughts and how they're impacting your life, and keep growing. And don't worry if, don't look where we are. A tightrope walker once, Reb Mendel Futterfass was a chassid who was in Siberian gulags for I don't know how many years, a bunch of years, maybe 14 years. And when he was released and he went out of Russia, communist Russia, and he moved to Eretz Yisrael, he shared many, many stories of his experiences, of how he learned lessons in how to serve Hashem from his experiences in the prison. And one time, he shared that one time there was a tightrope walker who was there as an artist, and they allowed him to practice his art in front of the whole camp. And they took two trees and they tied a rope in between it, and he walked across, unflinchingly walked across from one end to the other and then back. And afterwards, Reb Mendel asked him, what's the secret? And he said his secret is he is totally focused and he doesn't look down. If he would look down, or if he'd look to the right or to the left, he would fall in a second. But because he's 100% focused on where he needs to go, he just, that's the secret of his ability to do what he was doing. And he was doing that tightrope walk with no net underneath. And he did it skillfully, flawlessly. And he said the hardest part was when he turned around to go back, because he said at that point, for a split second while he was turning, he didn't have a goal right in front of his eyes. That focus of his attention was gone. It was missing. And until he regained his focus, it was like very, very scary for him. He felt like he might fall in that split second. So I think very many times as we're doing anything in our lives, it's very easy for us to say, am I there yet? That famous picture, I once saw it on a bumper sticker, but I'm sure you've seen it in different places also. I saw it once on a t-shirt. Are we having fun yet? If you're asking the question, it's a problem, right? Am I there yet? Am I passive, or am I suppressed? Or I don't think that we need to worry about exactly where we're up to in our personal growth. The most important thing is that we are moving forward, that we're growing, that we're learning, that we're growing, gaining awareness, that we're trying, that we're investing effort and energy. And I think that part of us that is measuring ourselves, am I good enough? Is there something wrong with me? I find that could be destructive. The reason for the order is that Hashem is not asking of us for emotions that are so strong and fiery and passionate. Hashem is asking us to work on, to have emotions at least enough that lead to Maisa, that lead to action. But it is speech, then emotion, thought and emotion, and then action. What does Beficha mean? All the mitzvahs that we do with our mouth, how we say a bracha, how we talk about Hashem, how we talk to other people. The words that we say, the words that we do not say. She writes here on the chat, we're always expanding and contracting constantly, in my opinion. In other words, we're growing and retreating, growing and finding ourselves to be, in a place of constriction where we need to grow more. Getting identified, and to her, that means getting identified and being not identified with our beliefs all the time. That is a very big piece, being identified and kind of feeling married to our thoughts and to our beliefs, because it's really true. Our unhealthy thoughts and habits is never what gets us stuck. It's only when we're very, very stuck to them. On that note, I want to just share quickly a story that my father said so often and just came up in my mind. He said there was a man who went to do business because he wasn't able he wasn't successful in business in his hometown. So he was encouraged by people to go travel and try to do business in a different town. So he borrowed money to be able to make the trip. And he had a certain amount of money. He gets on the train to travel. And while he's sitting on the train, he's sitting next to two people. And the two people start singing a song. And it goes like this. Na 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 na. And he's so captured by the tune. He loves it so much. He's like, wow, such a beautiful tune. And he turns to the guys and he's like, can you sing it again? And they're like, well, for the right price, we could sing it again. And so he gives them their price. They asked for, I don't know, a silver coin, a gold coin, a half a coin, whatever it was. And he pays them to sing it again. And so they sing it again. And then he's like, wait, I still don't know it. And I paid money for it. I may as well know it. And he gave them more money to learn the song. And it ended up being, he gave them a lot. He did it a third time until he finally learned the song. Na 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 na. I remember the tune so well because my father sang it so many times. Anyways, then he's like, well, I forgot, I paid so much money for this tune and I have so little money left. I want to make sure I don't forget the tune. So when whatever he was doing, when he went to get his suitcase, he went to collect his baggage from the baggage claim at the train station, and the police or the guard picks up his suitcase and says, whose is this? And he's like, he says it in Russian, it's mine. This suitcase is mine. Like, this is my suitcase. And whatever he was doing, he sang in that tune. And he lost all his money. He didn't do any business. He came home and he walks into the house and as he walked into the house, he started singing. And the kids, hearing him sing, they all jumped and they came running. They thought, wow, Tati is so happy. Something good must have happened. And they all start, holding his hand and they start dancing to the tune and they're singing the tune. And the neighbors heard, the neighbor who lent them the money said, oh, he's home. And they're so happy. Probably he has plenty of money and he got it back. And so he comes in and he asks for his money. And the guy says, he says in the tune, I don't have any money. And the guy thought he's crazy and he started screaming at him. Basically, the point is that he never let go of that song. He never, ever let go. He spent all his money on it and he refused to let go of it, even when it was causing so much chaos and confusion for everybody around him and for himself. And my father would say the story and he would say, okay, I'm narishkeit. You made a mistake, but to stay with the mistake, to refuse to let it go, that's a whole new level. That's a whole new level of shtus. That's a whole new level of mishigas. That's not what we want to do. We need to know that it's okay to say, I made a mistake, right? You wipe your hands clean of our mistakes. We repair what could be repaired and we go forward. We don't have to build. And just because I have this thought doesn't mean I have to perpetuate it and carry it with me and believe it and run with it in every single thing that we say and do. Okay, that was a little bit of a digression from what we were talking about, but I want to conclude this chapter with one other thought. My personal thought on this is that, it seems like, in a certain sense, the Baal Tanya has lowered the bar of what it looks like to be a Beinoni. We do not need to change our inner desires or impulses. We do not need to squash or repress or hide or run away from our human emotions on any level. We do not even need to develop full-fledged, quote unquote, holy emotions, right? All we need to do is do the next right thing. Just align our behavior, our conscious thoughts, our speech, and our action with Hashem here and now, right? It seems almost like the Baal Tanya is lowering the bar. But if we think about it, when we say Kikari v'lecha hadavar ma'od, it's very, very possible. And we say, what's the standard? If the standard means I must not have any negativity inside of me, I'm not ever allowed to feel a desire to trash my day and to trash my body and to ignore all the good things that I know and just waste my time. Okay, if we know there's no shame in having that desire, There's no shame in having shame. There's no shame in feeling alone or independent or anxious or insecure or any of the stuff that we do to ourselves, or any of the stuff that we tend to slip into in terms of our relations with other people. There's no shame in any of that. Somebody might think, well, what do you mean? If you have that, then you're not the good person. You're not the Beinoni. You're not the person you want to be. But and it seems like, well, you're lowering the standards. Fine. If you lower the standards, then yeah, anyone could be a Beinoni. But why would you lower the standards? Why wouldn't you have a higher standard? And the truth is that all of us who have quote unquote higher standards of being, if I hold myself to a higher standard, then in that same sentence, I am saying that right now I cannot be a Beinoni. I could be a Beinoni tomorrow. I'm working there. I'm getting on. I'm not on that level yet. We feel good that we have this ideal version of who we are supposed to be. And so it feels good to reject the person that we are today. It might even feel holy, but it's absolutely not. And this is something that the Baal Tanya set forth in the very first chapter of the Tanya. And throughout the last, all 17 chapters, this theme has been repeated again and again and again. The Baal Tanya keeps saying, well, you think you have to have these intense emotions? You don't. You think you're never going to feel angry? You're never going to feel frustrated? You're never going to feel ashamed or never going to get stuck in your past, in your habits, in your insecurity and doubts? Sorry, that's not happening. You're still the perfect human being if you have all of that stuff. The one thing that we need to try to do is this moment, make a choice that's aligned with Hashem's truth. And in a certain sense, it could look like the Baal Tanya is lowering the standards, but he's not. In quote unquote lowering the standard, what he's really doing is making it possible. Because when we have that ideal version of ourselves, what we're also saying is that right now I'm not there. And if I'm not there, so this minute doesn't matter. This minute matters less. Tomorrow, when I'm going to be quote unquote on a higher level, I'm going to be more spiritually developed, I'm going to be older, I'm going to grow more, then I'll be that ideal version of myself. Today, I'm not there yet. The Baal Tanya says, no. The ideal version of yourself is possible here and now today. Don't make up an ideal version of yourself. That's not what Hashem is asking you for. And doing that seems holy, but it's actually a very clever tactic of the Yetzer Hara to disengage us, to disempower us, to lose our focus, like that tightrope walker had to focus on one thing only, and that's his goal of where he's going. Our one thing is the next right behavior. And if we decide that where we're going is to the heavens, we're not good enough the way we are today, and we need to be better before we can live our best life, something major about us needs to change, or even something minor about us needs to change before I could consider myself wholesome and capable and empowered to make this a beautiful day, then I'm never gonna have that good day. Because the truth is, we're never gonna feel like it. We're never gonna feel like it. We're never gonna be that ideal, when we have that really artistic imagination and we have this amazing version of who we're supposed to be, we're never gonna get there. Because our imagination grows and we'll always have a higher version. And it's not lowering the standards to say, be happy with who you are today. Because why is it not lowering the standards? Because it's empowering us to take full-fledged ownership and responsibility for every single choice that we make. Because if I have an ideal version of myself, in the same breath say, yeah, I have that ideal version, but I'm human and I'll never be the person that I really want to be. And as a result, I give up. It becomes a free pass to obey my in the moment desire instead of my deeper desire to be one with Hashem. It becomes a free pass. It becomes the reason we do not advance in our personal growth and we stay stuck in our destructive habits and patterns. So the primary focus of all that we learned so far is, yes, we can. Yes, we can be the person that we want to be. And we can be that person here and now, even if nothing else changes. Why? Because we could choose. We could choose what we think, we could choose what we say, and we could choose what we do. And by choosing what we think, we could even generate emotions to get our hearts, if not blazing with passionate emotions, at least our hearts could be helping to point us in the right direction. And with every choice we make that is aligned with our neshama, we are a winner. We are fulfilling that. We're doing it, we're living it, we're being it. We're actualizing our greatest potential, not because we built a tower, not because we climbed a mountain, not because we changed the world in a visibly, huge project that makes everyone say, wow, but because we did this minute the way Hashem wants us to. We showed up with awareness of our neshama, with consciousness of Hashem's presence, with that clarity that we are here in this world by Hashem's power, with Hashem's empowerment, and for a purpose that is all about Hashem. That is all about demonstrating that awareness of Hashem in every single thing that we do. And that's the name of our game. And with this, we conclude a very big part, the whole beginning of the Tanya. This is our concluding part of the strategies of how to be a Beinoni. In the next week's chapter, chapter 18, the Baal Tanya starts off by saying, you know what? What about somebody who doesn't have time to meditate or doesn't have the mental capacity to meditate? When Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, when the Torah tells us, it's very possible, it's very close, it's very easily accessible. You know what? Meditation takes time. It's not very close, it's close, but it's not very close. So what can we do? What awarenesses can we develop that don't take time to absorb, that it's just about awareness? And the next few chapters are different awarenesses that we can develop about ourselves. It's not the kind of things that we need to meditate about. It's more like the Baal Tanya is now going to turn the light on what our neshama is, what our spiritual DNA is all about, what's the mechanism that actually keeps us one with Hashem at all times, in all places, no matter what we say or do. And with that awareness, those are shortcuts to directing and influencing our behaviors and the choices that we make every day. So I look forward to next week in Mitzvah Hashem, starting on that part. It's like a different part of the Tanya. And thank you very much for joining. I forgot to say this in the beginning. My niece is getting married today. It's very, very exciting. My dear sister's one and only, very beautiful, precious daughter is getting married today, and may our learning be a schus for her and her chassid. Chaya Mushka Bas Dvaira Serach and Menachem Mendel Ben Bracha. They should be zeicha to really experience all of Hashem's brachas and all of our brachas in a revealed way, and they should have a beautiful wedding and a beautiful life together. Thank you again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Just reminding those of you who have been part of our parenting series that we're done with that, so I'm not going to see you until next week in Mitzvah Hashem. Someone's asking, are we supposed to ignore our emotions and just focus on doing the right thing? Do our emotions matter in terms of our avodas Hashem? Are we just supposed to just bypass them? So I think that as a way of life, it's not a way to live. We want to get our emotions on board. We need to hear our emotions out, and we need to have those conversations between our minds and our hearts. But very many times when we're trying to change a behavior, or we're trying to change even a thought pattern, which is also a behavior, because thoughts are behaviors that we do in our minds. When we're trying to start something good, okay, I might decide, for example, that I want to do exercise. I might decide I want to do exercise in the morning, and I decide that I'm going to do it right when I wake up for 10 minutes every morning, okay? The first morning when I wake up, I'm going to have 7 reasons why today is not the right day to start. I'm going to have those 7 reasons, right? Now, I have to realize, and many of us will say, well, when I feel like it, I'll do it. You know, the Baal Tanya is saying, you may never feel like it. You made that decision to exercise. You need to be willing to just do it, even if you don't feel like it in the morning. Do it. Now, does that mean a person should never Like you wake up in the morning, you do your exercise and you do your exercise every day. And then one day you're just not feeling well, so you don't do it. That's different than never getting started and never getting on the train that we really want to be on. Do you hear what I'm saying? I think there's a balance between never recognizing our emotions and looking at our emotions as kings of our behavior and our choices that we make. In certain areas, in my life personally, like when we learned the last 2 weeks ago, was it, I don't know, when we were reviewing the Tanya and it hit me, this concept hit me that I sometimes have to get out of my head, never mind my emotions, but even just getting out of my head that I might never actually think it's a good idea to resist eating a piece of chocolate. I had to be willing to bypass my thoughts about it in the moment. It was so liberating to me to realize that. Do you know what I'm saying? But does it mean I should never think? I should never feel? No, of course not. It's not a way to live. But if we limit ourselves to how we feel, then that could give us dead ends in many areas of life, on many roads that we actually do want to travel on. So someone's asking a question. I want to repeat this for the recording because it's such a great question. Someone's saying, for example, if I like to daven because I grew up with a very punitive kind of parenting style, and davening was kind of a thing that I had to do, and if I didn't do it, I was punished. So as an adult, and in my journey of healthy living, I want to daven from a place of desire. I don't want to daven from a place of compulsion. I want to feel like this is a choice, that I'm doing it because I want to, not because I'm not with the pressure of compulsion, of I must. Does that? And so, and what's the balance of that? And I think that the key word is what you said, is that balance. To say, well, I'm going to force myself to daven whether I like it or not, ever, that would be so limiting. But by the same token, to say I am only going to daven when I feel like it is also limiting. Because then we're locking ourselves into our past. And we don't have to, and we're locking ourselves also into our emotions. Ultimately, to be a prisoner, to be free, to be truly free, means that we're not limited even by our own selves, and even by our own thoughts, and even by our own emotions. That's to be truly free. Because it's easy to make ourselves free of other people. It's very, very difficult to make ourselves free of ourselves, of our own thought patterns and mindsets and habits and criticism and negativity and all that stuff. It's also very hard to be free of our emotions. For me, let's say, for my eating, if I'm a prisoner, for me to only resist a piece of cake when I feel like it, or when I decide it's a good time to resist a piece of cake, would be totally limiting me to my healthiness, to my thoughts and to my emotions. It's so limiting for me. So for in your example of davening, it would be so limiting to say I'm only going to daven when I feel like it, because then your davening is only limited to your feelings, and davening is not going to be able to take you out of yourself. My personal recommendation would be to have certain things of davening that you do every single day, not because I feel like it, but because Hashem is waiting to hear my voice. And Hashem is waiting to hear my voice, and he wants me to be part of his choir. So the first, saying Shema Da'ani, Elokai Neshama, and Shema Yisrael, let's say, are just, this I'm going to do because Hashem is waiting to hear my voice. And I'm going to say it whether I feel like it or not. Just like you take care of your body, whether you feel like it or not. I'm not in the mood of eating, but if I don't eat, I'm not going to have, if I don't drink, I don't feel like drinking water, but if I don't drink water, I'm going to be coughing much more. So I better drink a tea, because if I don't drink tea, it's not good for my throat. So it's not about what I'm in the mood of. It's not about what I like. It's just, I need this for my health. And maybe it's because somebody else needs it from me. Davening Hashem needs from us also. I want to share what you're saying. Somebody here is sharing that when in the beginning, when she started davening, it felt like a pressure and a chore and it was not fun or exciting or meaningful. And so she went out and got herself some books, Rabbi Pliskin's books, Rabbi Nachman of Breslev's books, and you said also Rabbi Sachs. She got whatever books basically she could find about tefillah, about prayer. And reading those books infused her davening with a sense of joy and passion and excitement. And now it's something that brings her joy. That's so meaningful. Thank you for sharing that. All righty. Thank you all.